All right, I think I can hear you guys now. Krista, do you mind saying something just to make sure my...
Yes, hi Mayor.
Yeah, perfect. All right.
Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you. Good morning, Michael.
So I'm Michael Stellum, Bridges, legislative agency. Any moment now, we'll be jumping on. Just want to say thank you for being flexible with the schedule. We're basically making hearings all day, every day here at the Capitol, dealing with the budget. So I appreciate the flexibility, and it's just be even an hour on the call.
Sounds good. Thank you, Michael. And apologies for my appearance. I've been on phone calls since 6:30 this morning, so...
No worries at all.
All right, everyone, that was Jeff. He's been struggling trying to get onto the Teams meeting. I am going to give him a call right now. If you guys were able to hear that. 358.
We can hear you, Mayor. We heard.
I was going
we
to
heard
say,
the
I was like, am I muted?
No, we heard the announcement about Jeff.
Unknown participant is now
There
joining.
we go. All right. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. I'm so sorry. I tried for the last 10 minutes to figure out how to get on that Teams meeting, and it was not successful. So apologies that this is the best way to call in, but I'm glad that we can all talk.
Well, Jeff, thank you very much for making time. I know that you're very busy, so I really appreciate it. I know that we're a couple minutes behind, but I still want to go through introductions just so you can meet or just so you can hear who's on this call on our side. So I'm just going to do roll call on my side. Krista, if you just want to introduce yourself and your role at the City of Englewood.
Sure. Good morning. This is Krista Gray, the executive assistant for our city manager and city council.
Perfect. Christina?
Christina Underhill, the Director of Parks, Recreation, Library, and Golf for the City of Englewood.
David?
David Jackson, the Chief of Police.
Thank you. Joe?
Joe Anderson, City Council Member, Mayor Pro Tem.
Perfect. Kevin?
Kevin Ingalls, Director of Finance for the city.
All right. Kim?
Kim, City Council Member at Large.
Thank you, Kim. Mark? Mark, sorry, Mark, I'll skip you. Rita?
Rita Russell, Englewood City Council at Large.
Thank you, Rita. Sean?
Sean Lewis, City Manager.
All right. Stephanie? Stephanie, you there? All right, we'll go to Steve.
I'm Steve Ward. I represent Council District 4, which is in Southwest Englewood, bordering Littleton and Sheridan.
Perfect. And Tamara?
Tamara Niles, City Attorney.
Perfect. Tina?
Good morning, Senator Bridges. Tina Prang, City Council Member at Large. Good to see you again.
And Tim?
Tim Dodd, Deputy City Manager.
Perfect. Jeff, that's everyone on our side. Chelsea Noonenkamp, council member, is looking to attend if she could get out of a meeting. So just wanted to let you know she may drop in. But Jeff, any introductions you want to do on your side?
It's just me, guys. How are you all doing?
We're doing well. We're doing well. Thank you very much, Jeff. So Jeff, for the agenda, we had an update from you. If there's anything that you wanted to cover over the next 5 minutes before we get into 4 areas that we wanted to focus on our side. But anything from you, Jeff?
Sure. Just for context, I am chair of the Joint Budget Committee this year, and we are cutting $1 billion from our budget, in case you haven't heard. We have a $16.5 billion general fund, and to get to that 16.5, if we just copy and paste what we did last year, we're $1 billion short. That is $1 billion, including the 350 that we need to pass that we need to include because of the 130 that was passed. So we're looking at various different ways that there was no direction on time frame on that. So we're working with proponents of that to try and figure out if there's a different way we can phase that in. And we'll see how all of that goes. But the short version is we're cutting $1 billion. Everyone is going to hate me quite a bit in about a month once the budget comes out.
There has been some chatter about the state budget, Jess. So no, I appreciate everything that you guys are doing and completely understand the struggle that must be going through the legislative process. So Jeff, did you want me to just jump in?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jeff,
sure.
did you want me to just jump in on our side?
Yeah, I'm mostly just here to listen to you all. I feel like I know most of you all. Most of you have my cell phone number. So anytime you want to call and talk one-on-one, that's also great for me, and happy to be here with you all this morning.
Yeah, definitely take you up on that, Jeff. Jeff, so I guess for this year, I kind of wanted to do something a little bit different. We did ask staff to provide us a list of priorities, legislative priorities that we would like for you to consider on your side. But I also wanted to provide you kind of a little bit of an overview of some of the discussions we've been having over the past year here in the city, and just some of the impacts that we're seeing. And just wanted to bring it to your attention as part of potentially this legislative process, but just to kind of get an idea of where we stand as a city. And
sounds
so,
great.
really, I'll focus on the first one is going to be affordable housing. And so obviously we kind of move forward with our Unified Development Code update late in 23. And so as part of that process, we did form a citizen committee to look to form an affordable housing task force. And basically what they did is they met with different stakeholders, understood the different tools that were available from the city perspective, and then provided recommendations to City Council just last month, about 2 weeks back. And what I'm seeing, and I can't speak for all of council, but one of the things that I'm starting to see is that it's going to take incentives in order to get affordable housing built within the city. And so obviously we have Prop 123, I believe it is, that would help with that. But one of the main recommendations from this body was that we do need an affordable housing fund in order to incentivize developers to build affordable housing. We did have a PUD discussion just a week ago where it was basically where the remark was basically stating that potentially they would rather pay the fee in lieu instead of actually building the affordable housing. So we're doing all the right things. We're building density. Or looking to build density or make it easier to build density within the city. But there's still going to be roadblocks that we see from the from the economic level that may curtail us getting affordable housing in. I know there's not much that you could do there. Maybe you could speak to Prop 123 and that aspect of it. And then I wanted to go into construction defects because that was the other aspect that came out of the affordable housing task force, is that they would like to see more for sale built properties. And obviously this was the discussion that's been ongoing since 2018 in terms of trying to get this rectified. And I'm just trying to understand, are we taking any different tactics this year to kind of get construction reform, defects reform, move forward this year? So those are kind of my two questions, Jeff.
Sure. On the first one, we also in the state, I have been a huge advocate of housing affordability. It's been probably the number one thing I've worked on over the last few years. We had a committee during COVID that I was a part of to take some of those ARPA dollars. We invested more than $500 million into housing affordability, whether that was low-income housing, middle-income housing, an innovative housing bill that I ran to try and look at new ways of construction like modular. There is also, I passed a bill to create the Middle Income Housing Authority, and that is modeled loosely, roughly on existing housing authorities, but focused on that middle income space, allows folks who are looking to build middle income housing to access the essentially the muni bond market to help finance those projects. And then third, I passed and created the first in the country, and I think maybe still only, middle income housing tax credit. So those are things that you should look at as you're looking at that 80 to 120 AMI middle income space. And then in the affordable housing space, the low income space, we dramatically expanded last year, and I was part of that process, the state level tax credits that we give out for low income housing. So essentially the state's version of LIHTC is dramatically expanded over the next 5 years. $1, $2, $3, you should definitely look at those. The fact that you have a payment in lieu means that you're, I'm assuming, building up some dollars into a fund that can help with funding of some of those low-income housing projects. I think that's awesome. And there is a lot to do at that local level that you all can leverage a lot of those state dollars, but you do need some of that, some local inputs in order to access those state dollars. And then on the construction defects piece, yes, there is a new bill that is not like last year's bill that is starting in the House. I am not a co-sponsor on that bill just yet. I've been burned by co-sponsoring bills on introduction before that change into something that is unrecognizable to me from what it is that I originally put my name on. So I will be watching that very closely. I voted for and co-sponsored last year's bill on construction defect reform. The thing about construction defect reform is, while I think it will dramatically increase the number of for sale multifamily units across the state, what it won't do is increase the total number of multifamily units being built. It'll shift some of the inventory that is currently rental towards for sale, which is great, building long-term wealth, having that entry into home ownership. I think that in itself is an extremely important part of the housing landscape. But I think it's important to note that that doesn't increase total number of units. And to really get at housing affordability in the state, the most important thing we can do is increase the total number of units being built. I have a bill this year on modular that I think will help with that, and certainly all the stuff that we've done before that. I think it takes some time for this to work, and interest rates are such that even market rate has crashed in terms of new builds, new permits. But hopefully once those interest rates come down, we'll be able to see a lot more construction across the state for housing that is affordable, both affordable housing for low-income folks and housing affordability for those middle-income folks.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Jeff. Yeah, the pendulum is definitely one-sided right now, so I would definitely like to see it move a little bit more towards the other side as well. But perfect. I will pass it over to Steve for the next item. Councilmember Ward.
Hi, Steve.
Hi. So speaking of pendulums, we have recently encountered a situation where it would appear that the pendulum on law enforcement reform has swung too far in one direction. Specifically regarding the post-certification suspension or revocation when a jury awards even 1 penny to a plaintiff. And we've found that this drives a claim of unnecessary force or other violation on behalf of law enforcement into settlement, as opposed to perhaps allowing a jury to make a decision on whether that law enforcement officer should retain his credentials or whether the city should have liability. So I think there's some room there for some change, which would allow cities to enforce their laws while still sweeping officers who perhaps are not fit for the job out, and without forcing an officer who maybe makes a mistake off of the job, or forcing a city to sign a large check in order to keep him on the job.
If you have a proposal on how to better thread that needle, I would love to hear. I mean, the bill that we passed on that was essentially the only time an officer has any danger of losing that post-certification is when they have been found to have broken the law. And even if and that only counts if the policies of the department are in line with that, right? So if a department has a policy that is actually against the law, but they were following policy, they're still covered. So as long as they're following the law and or policy, they're in no danger of losing their post-certification. So I hear you on that. If there's some other way to draw that line, I'd be open to it, but I also think that folks that enforce our laws should be following our laws.
Yeah, I do too. And I think one possibility there would be to have the jury be the finder of fact as to whether or not the post-certification should be revoked. Because that would allow it to be done in cases of extreme circumstances, but where the jury says, well, we're going to award $1 or something along those lines, perhaps it doesn't rise to the point where the post-certification needs to be revoked. And I saw our chief come on briefly. Perhaps he has some comments as well.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Councilman, did you ask me a question?
It just looked like you might have some additional comments or.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I do think I was under the impression, I am new in this role and frankly new in this state, but I was under the impression that an excessive force claim could put somebody's post license in danger. I could be mistaken on that, but I don't think that's breaking the law. Just to note.
Well, I mean, excessive force is illegal, right?
Well, assault would be like unnecessary force or excessive force. I think that in the course of taking somebody into custody could be different than proactively assaulting somebody. It would kind of depend on what we're talking in very specific detail, I guess. But I think that sometimes what pops up is an officer being unprofessional when they use force, which I'm not supportive of. But the difference between that and actually assaulting somebody, and I think that's where we get into some of the semantics of that, perhaps.
Happy to dive into that. I really feel like we need to make sure that as folks are enforcing the law, they're doing it in a way that that respects the law. And so if there's some piece of this that we need to look at, I'm happy to look at it. But if you have specific examples, that would be really helpful to hear about and know about if there's going to be any kind of revisiting of this, because to say that excessive force is something that should be excusable, which I don't hear you saying, but that's not a policy, that's not a law that I think would find a welcome space in today's legislature. So
totally
I
understand.
appreciate where you're coming from. Happy to continue that conversation.
Totally
Yeah, Jeff,
agree.
I think that would be that's a good point. I think just with the time constraints that we have today, we can't go into the specifics, but I think talking to the specifics of what we've seen will help you understand where we're coming from on this issue.
That'd be helpful.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to the third item. This was brought up by Member Newcamp, and actually you kind of brought it up at the start. But we were just trying to figure out the enactment of Prop 130 and what that timing looks like, where you are with that. It sounds like you are looking to delay based on the budget shortfall we have this year, but can you provide us a little bit more context on where we stand with 130?
Sure, no delay. That is,
Okay.
I did not mean to, I may have even said those words. That's not what there's nothing in 130 that says 350 million has to be spent this year. And in working with the proponents, there is some discussion about how that might look. It is still really early. I mean, it's like mid-February, so to say it's really early is kind of crazy, but it is still really early in those discussions. The budget committee is clearly very involved in it. Barb Kirkmeyer was involved with 130 itself and is staying highly involved in all of the conversations around what might happen with that. The $1 million for anyone who is for anyone who dies in line is certainly something that we will be taking care of this year. That's not something that would be delayed. But again, how we fund all of these is still up in the air.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. I'll pass it over to Tina on the last item that we wanted to highlight today. Go ahead, Member Prang.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Jeff, again. Great to hear your voice. So you will be
great to hear yours.
Yeah, I know, it's been a while. You won't be shocked to...
Are you going to ask about education?
Right, yes, exactly. So just, wanting to touch on the whole, pain point that you were referencing earlier with our budget, and, everybody is going to be fighting for those dollars. In addition to that, we have lots of, conversation on the national level around public education. You have been a huge advocate for many, many years for public education. And so I just wanted to hear some of your thoughts on whether you have intentions of, protecting funding for public education and holding that as a strong priority in the state of Colorado.
Absolutely. The last place in the world that I want to cut from our budget is K-12 public education. That being said, a third of our budget is Medicaid. That's the biggest piece, and almost exactly as big, just slightly under, is K-12 public education. So when we look at how do we cut $1 billion out of our state budget, it's tough to make that math work without some kind of modification to the funding formula in K-12. Now, bottom line, absolutely, positively, there will be a very significant increase in the total dollars that we spend on K-12 public education in the state. That's mandated by Amendment 23. That will absolutely, that is locked in. what you have probably heard about, what you've seen in the governor's budget proposal, is to eliminate averaging of the student count. So right now, the way we fund schools is a funding formula that's based on the per pupil count in various districts. That per pupil count is determined by a single day in October. It's called the October Count Day. And Tina, I know you know all of this. I'm just giving context for folks who don't. In that October Count Day is currently, under the formula we're in this year, is a 5, either that this year's number if it's higher, or an average over the last 5 years. So in districts that have declining enrollment, rather than seeing that drop in that year, it's sort of a 5-year smoothing over with a 5-year averaging. The funding formula that was negotiated last year moves that to 4 years this year. Now there's been some issue with the state ed fund and a technical fix that one of our staff made in June that changed the dollar amount in the state ed fund, which means that new formula may not go into effect, which I don't love, but that is what the current law says. And so the real question is going to be, what do we do with that averaging? The governor proposed moving that averaging to 1, essentially 0, that you just get paid for the students that you currently have this year and no more. There's no averaging over a 5-year span or a 4-year span. It's just the current year you have. I think the 1 year is bad public policy because it doesn't give districts the ability to plan. And if districts don't have any kind of reassurance about what their budget will look like the next year, then what we have seen, what I've been told by folks who've been on school boards, is that they hold dollars back that should otherwise be invested in their kids. And so having at least a 2-year averaging gives districts some assurance about what their budget will look like the following year. They can make decisions on hiring and all those sorts of things with that 2-year averaging. And most of the savings that we see from 1 year is actually achieved in that 2 year. So I think 2 years is probably where we will end up, but to move that whole way this year seems, it's a pretty significant shock to districts that I don't think is fair to our kids. So we will probably end up somewhere on a glide path to 2. But I don't know what that will look like yet. Again, it's early. The speaker is actually engaged in a lot of those conversations. So, I'm chair of the JBC, which is a very nice role. She is Speaker of the House and has been there for a while, and has also served on JBC and has been deeply involved in education issues. So she has asked for a little bit of time to work on that, and I am happy to give her that time to work on it. We'll see what happens, but again, there's no world where I support an education bill that eliminates averaging entirely this year.
That's great. I appreciate that advocacy, and I do think that gets to the fairness and giving that time to prepare. So thank you for that response.
Yeah, you bet. I will say the new funding formula recognizes, in ways the current funding formula doesn't, the challenges of educating kids, that it's more expensive to educate kids who are low income, who are English language learners, ELL, and especially the challenge of educating folks who are both ELL and low income. And the current funding formula really, I think it was written in the early 90s. There's not a lot of folks who still, fund things the way they did in the early 90s. The state looks very different than it did then. The funding formula, I think, is I think many people who look at it would agree it is outdated. Moving to the new funding formula, I think, is critical for ensuring that we're adequately funding the kids that we have in our districts today. The old funding formula with the averaging spends a lot of money on students that don't exist. They're calling them phantom students. So at the end of the day, if I have to choose, and given the realities of our budget, I may have to do this. So I have to choose between funding students that don't exist and fully funding the kids who do. I'm always going to side with the kids who do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
Jeff, I know that we're at time.
I could talk about I'm sorry, I could talk about education funding for like literally hours if you guys let me. So that was probably a more thorough answer. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
I appreciate it.
Well, Jeff, I wanted to thank you for your time. You know, you have a busy schedule, you got a lot going on, so I really appreciate it. Yeah, so yeah, thanks for the pointed answers on these questions. We'll be back in touch. You know, I know that you got a busy schedule. We'll find time in your calendar to speak about other things. We didn't get a chance to talk about family or any of that, so I hope all is well, Jeff. Hope family's doing well, and I know that we'll be back in touch here in the near future. So good luck to you.
You all can text me anytime. And Kit, my son has just turned 1. You all may know he was in the NICU for about 2 months last year. He arrived about 2.5 months early, and he is just crushing it. He's doing so well, and yeah, it's really wonderful. He's doing great.
Happy to
So
hear
thanks
that.
for asking.
That is great. Happy to hear that, Jeff. Thank you so much, Jeff. I know you got another meeting to run to, so
I got the floor.
the
I gotta
legislative
go
session.
stay here and then vote on stuff. So thank you all. Take care.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
All right, bye, everyone.
Bye.
Unknown participant is now exiting.